All right, well, there's our cue to go ahead and get started. So, welcome to today's Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice. Substance Use Echo, we're thrilled to have you join us. If you can just take a minute and put your name and contact information into the chat, it's just another way to get to know each other on this virtual call. As you notice, we are recording today's session. We use those for quality and educational improvement. We store them on our Canvas page as well as our YouTube channel. You're always free to go back and review these videos and share those with colleagues. If you're anything like me, it takes me a while, or I hear something and I need to go back and review it. And so the videos are a great way to go back and share the information or talk about it with colleagues. But by participating in our session today, you are consenting to be recorded. So don't hit that leave button, but if you have real issues about being recorded, just disconnect from the session. We love interaction. So if you have any questions or conversations that you want to have, please put those into chat. We love learning from each other. I think that's the great thing about Echo is hearing everybody's perspectives. We're all coming from it from either different areas of the state or even in different states and different professions. So hearing everybody's perspective, man, is it Monday? I cannot talk. Perspective, it is just a great way to do that. We also love case narratives. Case narratives are whatever you want to call it, whether it's a case narrative, a problem of practice, a family client that we're struggling with or want to celebrate. It's a great way to get that support. So if you have it with that and want to present a case, please reach out to Project Scope at usu.edu and we will get you set up on the schedule. We do talk about sensitive topics, so please protect those individual privacy. De-identify any information. If you have any questions, reach out to one of our hub members. We all have an asterisk in front of our name so that we are easier to find on chat. Key components of an Echo session is we have a subject matter expert. Today, we're really excited to have Chelsea Nielsen with us today from GRANDfamilies, who's going to be talking to us about that. And then we have our case presentation and going back and talking about recommendations from all of us. Everybody on this call has knowledge and expertise that they bring to those cases and experience. So we love hearing from each other on that. And that's how we build that professional networking and over this virtual world. Sometimes it's hard to feel connected over that. And this is a great way to do it and learn from each other. If we've all been on Zoom, so probably know how to rename our profile, but you click on those three dots by your name, as well as raising your hand or doing those reactions. Now, sometimes even when we do hand movements, our Zoom will give us reactions for just our hand movements as well too. But if you need a minute to know how to do that, please reach out to myself or Leo and we'll make sure you know how to utilize all of that. Just some session etiquette. Again, if you will just make sure you introduce yourself, keep your questions brief and on topic, and we love to see those smiling faces over Zoom. I know it's easy to do some multitasking when we're on a virtual call or even in person, but we encourage you to turn on your camera, and it just helps build that networking, as well as if you're the one who's talking, that you're not talking to a bunch of black squares. Nothing gives you more anxiety as a presenter than not seeing smiling faces with with everybody. I noticed I just said that and I saw Chelsea come up and she was like, yeah, that's what I want to see. Um, in order to get a certificate, we do ask that you fill out our survey. And thank you to everybody who fills out that survey. We take the information from that survey to help guide our ECHO networks. So topics that you want to see happen, feedback that we get from those is how we come up with our sessions, as well as any new ECHO networks that we start here at the Institute. So thank you for filling those out. And then that's how you will get your certificate of attendance. Canvas is where we store everything, PowerPoints, the case recommendations, the recordings, all of our resources are stored on there. So if you would like access to our Canvas page, again, please just email project scope at usu.edu and we will get you access to our Canvas page. Just another plug for case studies, case narratives, the problem of practice, whatever it is to just talk about. I mean, I know I'm an early interventionist in my day job, and I know that there are sometimes that families that I'm working with, I'd love to get everybody's thoughts and ideas on it. And it's a great way to just learn from each other. It also sometimes gives me that validation that what I'm doing is on the right track. Sometimes it can feel like we're out here on our own struggling with different things. So it's a great way to just learn from everybody on this call. We do have social media. So if you take a minute and want to follow us on social media, we share resources, recommendations, things that are shared with us throughout the month. So take a minute and follow us. It's just a great way to stay connected. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn the time over to Chelsea.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here.
We practiced it, but
so I'm really good at it now. Okay, perfect. Like she mentioned, my name is Chelsea Nielsen, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the GRANDfamilies program that I work with. I've worked with GRANDfamilies for about almost 10 years now, and it's been an amazing program to work with and an amazing and insightful opportunity to see how kinship caregivers navigate life and where we can step in and help and support them. So I think it's given me a lot of really good insights. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and present on it today. Um, and yeah, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards, or if things get thrown in the chat. I may not see them, so if you need me to answer those, let me know. But GRANDfamilies, in case there's some that maybe have not heard of our program before, um, it's a program of Children's Service Society of Utah. And Children's Service Society itself was founded in 1884 as a day nursery. So it's Utah's oldest non-denominational nonprofit. And then GRANDfamilies is one of the programs of Children's Service Society that came around in 2002. And it came from a seed grant. There was a lot of need that we were noticing in the community for resources for kinship families, meaning families who are raising a relative's child or just a child that's not their own. And so it was started mainly in Salt Lake, and it's grown throughout Utah. So like I mentioned, GRANDfamilies is a program that supports kinship families who are raising a relative's child or a child that's not their own. And we strive to provide information and support in any way that we can to these families. Oftentimes, because these families aren't, if they're not a part of foster care or if they don't have a DCFS case open, because sometimes that's just not possible, they don't really get access to a lot of resources, which is why we exist, is so we can kind of step in and fill that gap and say, hey, there's still resources for you. And you don't have to pay us for it. We can just provide that support and assistance. So I'll go through and talk about some of the things that we do provide and help our families with. Most of the families that we work with, they are either grandparents, aunts, uncles, maybe even a neighbor friend. Most of the time, the situation is that the biological parent has struggles with substance use, and so it's created a situation where the child cannot live with the biological parent anymore. And so other scenarios sometimes are mental health challenges from biological parents, or death of a parent. There's a lot of different scenarios. Um, and you may notice after this presentation that you spot or realize that you know a lot of people in this situation. After I started working here, I started realizing, oh, I know a lot of people in kinship families. So um, I'll have my information here at the end as well. We serve families all over Utah. So if you have questions for me or you need support for a family, we're happy to help that way. So our key services that we provide to families are case management. We provide basically case management, I like to just say is basically just supporting the family with what they need. So we plan with them. They'll come in, we'll sit down and plan with them and discover what are your basic needs. We use the five protective factors to kind of determine what their needs are. And oftentimes, the caregiver is raising the child without any guardianship or legal custody. And so they are in a situation where they have all of the responsibility and none of the rights to support this child. And so part of case management sometimes is that we sit down with them and help them through the guardianship paperwork through the district courts. Because it's available to everyone in Utah, we can do that. And we've done it so many times, we're able to help. We don't provide legal advice, but we can provide that support and walk them through the process and um, provide support in court just by being there. We can't really testify or anything like that unless subpoenaed, but we are there to provide that support and guidance as they go through that process of guardianship. And other things we might provide for them if they need it are resources through Department of Workforce Services. There's something specifically called the Specified Relative Grant, and that grant can provide funds for the caregiver if they can prove that they're biologically related to the child and then other things are in place. So we can help them apply for that or apply for Medicaid or other services that way. And then we can sit down and figure out, if there's a service that they need that maybe we can't provide, we make sure that they get connected to a service that does provide that. So each client gets their own family advocate who works on their case, checks in with them frequently or as often as the client would like them to. And we just make sure that we provide that ongoing case management for as long as they would like to be a part of the program. Um, we have some families who come and they just want guardianship and they're like, we're good with everything else. And others that they come and get guardianship of a baby and they're here till the baby's 18, and then they continue to contribute to the program and provide support to other caregivers. It's pretty cool to see some of that. So that's one thing I do love about this program is it's not extremely strict on, you can or can't enjoy these services because of X, Y, and Z. The only requirement is that you are a kinship family. And so um, then you're welcome to join the services. And if they feel applicable to you, we're happy to continue providing those. So um, we provide that. We also provide some education. We have classes that I'll go into a little bit more. But we do provide those as a way to provide support and education to caregivers and the children in their care. And so we've got some great curriculum that we've created, as well as additional curriculum that we've been using to provide additional support where needed. So we'll go over that. And then we also provide something called Friend to Friends, which are monthly family events for the families that are in our program. And I love that we do this because a lot of these families are in situations where it's financially difficult for them to take all the kids to a corn maze or to go out and do something fun as a family. And so the friend to friends we offer are free, and we try to provide events that allow families to have some time to just relax and talk to other families in their similar situations and let their kids play and just enjoy it without having to worry about paying for that. And so we've had some comments about, things like corn mazes or whatever else we've offered to the families. We've had families just say we're so appreciative because this is not something we would have paid for. The kids just wouldn't been able to go to something like this had this not been an opportunity. So it's not the whole program, but it does help address that need for some respite or some, you know, enjoyment and fun as a family. So we do a lot of different things. Sometimes it's more simple, like, hey, we're going to meet at the park and have popsicles. Or it could be like, hey, we've rented out a movie theater because we had the funds to be able to do that and we want to provide X, Y, and Z. We also partner with a high school in Davis County regularly. They've been amazing. And they have every year for several years helped provide Christmas support for these families. And that's kind of one of our friend to friends that we do as well. So, um, and then we do have clinical services. We have therapists available to support um, anyone within Children's Service Society's programs, but especially for grand families, we make a lot of referrals to them. Getting mental health services is can be challenging if you don't have insurance or you can't pay for it or whatever it is. And so we do try to provide that for free and even whether or not they have insurance. So that's been a great benefit. We do have a wait list, so there is high need for it. But we've definitely been able to help a lot of, especially kinship families or adoptive families provide, get that extra support that they need through this process. So, um, I briefly mentioned before the five protective factors. And I wanted to go over this because everything that we do at Grand Families is based off of these five protective factors. So when we meet with the client, we have them take a survey to get some general information, but then also to see, you know, where are you at with your parental resilience? Like we'll break it down and define it for them because it's kind of a big term. But, how do you feel like you have the capacity? Do you feel like you're able to be resilient with all of these challenges that come up? And there's several questions they answer for that. And then we do the same thing with each of the other ones, like concrete supports. Do you feel like you have someone to turn to? Do you feel like you know where to go if you lost your job? And all those things. And so we evaluate those, and then it helps guide our initial intake so that we can determine what specific things we can help this family with and what would be most effective. Um, and we try to do them in order, right? Where if it's like, hey, my biggest need right now, and it really does feel like kind of an emergency, I need to work on guardianship. Okay, then that's what we focus on, but we still have this other information that we can work through and help these families with. So, um, even on the previous slide where you saw the key things that we provide for families, again, all of those things we try to uh, capture all of these principles and protective factors in those. And so the friend to friends are meant to help with social and emotional competence of children, but also just with social connections in general, and concrete supports. And so then also we've got, the groups that are meant to provide more knowledge of parenting and child development and concrete supports and social connections and resilience, all of those things. So you might hear me refer to that a few more times, but that's what this is that we're looking at. And I'm sure all of you have seen this before, but it's been a great tool that we've been able to use. So just a little bit more about our classes that we offer. So we offer psychoeducational classes for all ages. So we have a group for caregivers, and that's, you know, what it says is that anyone that's caregiving or taking care of a child that's not their own, they're invited to take these groups for free. The teens ages 12 to 18, they have their own groups as well, and children ages 5 to 11 have their own groups as well. So we try to hold these all at the same time within our counties so that caregivers don't have to find babysitters and things like that. Um, but sometimes it just depends on the need and who is all able to come. So we do hold these 4 times a year. Um, and sometimes we'll offer them virtually if that is easier for clients. And we go over a lot of really good topics. I mean, I won't go into all of them today, but we go over things like trauma and how that impacts a child's brain and the dynamics of kinship care and living in kinship care and what that trauma can sometimes do to a child, and what that trauma can do to a caregiver as well. There's a grief process they go through. There's a lot of joy that caregivers and children experience in kinship care, and then there's a lot of challenges. So, and they're very unique to their situation. So we try to talk about those. We talk about the brain and neuroplasticity um, in each of the groups, but we do try and, obviously for children ages 5 to 11, neuroplasticity is a big word. So we break it down in a way that they'd understand. And we talk about managing emotions and things like that. These are all groups that we have created, and they've been uh, just awesome to see caregivers come and just appreciate that support and that additional education. Caregivers are not required to come to these, it's just an option. So caregivers don't necessarily have to do everything that we offer, but they do have that option to join in on all of these things. Um, Recently we have with our caregiver psychoeducation classes, we have started having kinship caregivers with lived experience participate in co-facilitating the groups. And that's made a huge difference for us because I think, me and my staff, as we present, maybe some of us have lived kinship experience, but some of us don't. And I think from personal experience and from the experiences I've heard from others, you just get more out of something when you hear it from someone who has real life experience with it. And I've heard it said same boat therapy, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of support that comes from someone who knows what that's like and can share their own experiences and challenges, but also their own advice. And so it's another reason we have all of these groups come together is to give each other that support and advice, but also to normalize the situation, which is pretty big, especially for kids, is normalizing that, hey, you live with grandma and grandpa too, like so do I, and that's okay. That's good. So a lot of great things come from these groups. We also do provide a life skills training course for teens, and there's one for adults. Our psychoeducational groups are specifically for um, kinship families. And we go over some similar things as this, like, peer pressure and um, learning more about substance use and how to be prepared and protected and things like that. But this one is for anybody in the community. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a kinship child or kinship family that joins these groups. So we offer these in an effort to, again, provide more information about substances um, and how that can affect the brain and the body, and have open questions about those kinds of things. And so, as well as peer pressure and, uh, just having that self-confidence to avoid risky behaviors. So we go through a lot of different things. And as you can see, a lot of statistics here at the bottom show it's proven to help quite a bit with a lot of different areas. So that's an additional thing we offer. We also do um, recently started up informal support groups, and this is where we don't have a curriculum. It's just where caregivers can get online and they can determine what topic they want to learn about the next week. We'll have a schedule and we can talk about that topic, or we can discuss maybe what challenges they're facing. And it's been really helpful for families to kind of have that informal so that it's a more open place for them to share their feelings and and just learn new things based on what they want to learn. So we've also, so in addition to having caregivers participate more in our groups, and we've had caregivers participate more in like advisory councils to help plan events or plan things for the program. We've also started involving the youth. Again, that lived experience is pretty valuable, and it's been a good way to help the youth get involved. We've been able to compensate the youth for participating in youth council, and it gives them a lot of leadership experience. It's a year-long commitment. They help plan events for other teens. Right now, this is mainly in Salt Lake, but we're hoping to expand it through other counties as we get more interested teens. Um, and then back again, kind of on the caregiver side of things, caregivers are also compensated for helping with the groups. They also have the option to um, be listed as a caregiver mentor to provide support to other caregivers as needed. And then they can also help with other support groups and planning events as well. And again, they'd be compensated for that. So we've been really glad that we've been able to provide that for our families. I've already dug into friend to friends quite a bit, but this just kind of gives you an overview a little bit more. They're a monthly event, but we usually have larger events quarterly. So I have a big spring event. Usually that revolves around like Easter, springtime, Easter egg hunts, things like that. And then summer, more of a barbecue, fall, corn mazes or parties or whatever. And then winter is usually um, like holiday support or Christmas support. Um, we do have donation giveaways and workshops as well. We try and provide, again, if families have questions about specific things, or we're noticing that a lot of them are having questions about taxes, for example, and how to claim the child on their taxes, or if they can, we'll have an accountant come and present and answer some questions for them too over Zoom. So we try to provide those kinds of things. And then we do participate in Child Abuse Prevention Month, and we try and encourage other families to, do activities that minimizes risks of child abuse and promotes strengthening families and things like that. So we'll do that sometimes as part of our friend of friends too. Um, just as, as we're wrapping up on this, I love this story. This is something that I was thankful I could see firsthand. Um, and goes to show that services like this help, like the services, the work that we're all doing, they can make a difference. Maybe it's a small one, sometimes maybe it's a big one, but they do make a difference. And so this little blurb just talks about there was a family that I was working with several years ago, and they would attend friend to friend events. They'd come to groups and things like that. And they had some situations at times where they really needed childcare. They couldn't afford it. There were so many circumstances that made it impossible for them to fully care for the child for a certain period of time. And they were able to connect and become friends with another family at one of our friend to friends. And so then they kind of, helped each other with childcare. And then if they, needed help with something else, they were that support for them that they really needed, because everybody needs a village. And so it was able to connect these families um, in a way that allowed them to provide that essential support and help with those protective factors. And these families stayed in contact and stayed friends for years. I don't necessarily know where they're at now in terms of their friendship, but I imagine that it's been really beneficial for them, at least over the years that I could see. So, um, I know that's a lot of information. I'm happy to answer questions if that's an option. And here is my information as well. Um, you can reach me. This is my cell phone. You can text or call me. Clients can text or call me on that number, and that's my email as well. Um, but any questions? I didn't get a chance to check the chat.
So we will open this up for questions, but I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
One, the first one, and this is Janelle, if you can't see me. Um, so my first question is how do families or kinship care families get involved with this?
Hmm.
And my second one so I've been doing a lot of research around this um, kind of idea that social connectedness is really a public health um, problem. And we need to, and you guys have done a great job in fostering that. So, how do you notice that, or have you guys looked at the differences between kinship families that do partake in these services versus the ones that they don't in regards to like their stress level or ability to care for this? If that does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a really good question. I don't know that we've had like something targeted to research that specifically, but I have seen, and this is more of like a maybe an objective view on my part, but I have personally seen it help a lot of families. I think those families that stay connected are able to get quite a few resources that maybe other families aren't aware of. And I think sometimes families don't realize that they need those. And so from my point of view, again, we haven't done specific research, but we do see on surveys and things like that, um, that generally I think people do better um, when they've got that social connectedness. Well, I know that they do. I mean, there's other studies that prove that, but that's a good thought because I think it would be pretty interesting too to kind of dig in and look into that a little bit more. We
Yeah.
do, yeah, we do like a survey before and we meet and then a survey at like 10 or 12 weeks. And we do have some pretty positive results when it comes to them rating their own social connectedness. So I will say that.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I don't know if you know there's a gal out of BYU who has really focused on this social connectiveness as a kind of a public health crisis
Yeah.
and has taken some Utah data in different areas, whether it's in areas of foster care or workplace or religious organizations. And she said that her data or results should be out in the next little while, it will be interesting to see what comes out of that and what our state does, because I think just in terms of all of us as a public health crisis, that social connectedness is kind of missing, and we're kind of seeing a lot of things happen. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Let me know if what you find out because I'd be really interested to see that.
and then there's to just my first question, how do families get involved in it?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different avenues. Some people get online and find us through Google, right? And then there's a way on our website that they can refer themselves. Um, Other times they just call in, or another caseworker they're working with will call in for them. So I think that the best way um, is to either, like I said, get online and find the general phone number, or it's you can also just call me or text me on this number or email me, and I can make sure you get to the right region for whatever area that client lives in. Because I'm most of Northern region, I help coordinate and supervise, so I could get you connected. So once they get in contact with us, then we can sit down and start, explaining our services to them and see what they want to participate in, or, what they want to receive.
And then there is the questions in chat. So the first one is from Gretchen. Is so where are your groups or services located? And I've heard you may have had to close locations due to funding. Is that still available to all who need?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So we do have it's going to change quarter to quarter where we hold the support groups and based on if we've got enough people that want to join those at the time. But they are held like here in our Logan office, they're held in our Brigham City office. Wherever we have an office, we try and hold those. And we have an office in St. George, um, and an office in Utah County, several all the way up to here in Cache. And in regards to funding cuts, unfortunately, that's true. We've had to close down our, the new fiscal year, we'll have to close down our Tooele office as well as our Davis office. But fortunately, at least for the Davis office, Davis Behavioral is coordinating with us so that we're able to still have some sort of office space there. Um, and when it comes to Davis and Tooele, we're still going to offer services to those clients. We'll just maybe have to reserve rooms at the library or find other community partners that we can partner up with to meet up with the clients, but we also can do over Zoom and things like that. So our hope is that it won't affect clients' ability to receive services, but the physical offices unfortunately would be closing because of those funding cuts. So,
And then the other question is from I'm the worst with names, so again, I'll apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Tissa that says, is it for grandparents or can it be for any kin?
it can be for any kin. We've even had people that are like, "Hey, my son's friend is living with us, and now we need to get guardianship." So they may not even be related. It's just a matter of, if it's a child that's not your own that you're raising, whatever circumstance. That's a good question.
So I'm going to open it up to anybody else who has any questions or put them in chat and I will ask them.
Maybe I answered all of the questions.
I was gonna ask,
Yeah.
sorry, this is Leo. I was just wondering, what are there like any misconceptions surrounding kinship care here in the state of Utah? And if so, have they presented, maybe barriers, and how have you guys addressed maybe some of those barriers that start to come up? Or yeah, just any misconceptions. That's what I'm
Yeah.
wondering a bit.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think one of the bigger misconceptions we see is that at least with our program is like, oh well, only if you don't make enough money you can be part of the program, or only people who maybe are well off financially don't need the program. But those services are still needed and available to any socioeconomic status, right? Um, I also think, and I don't know if it's necessarily a misconception, but I also think there's just in general, there's not at least when it comes to like financial support or support from government funding. I don't think that there's a full understanding of what kinship care is. I think it gets mixed into foster care a lot, which sometimes those do overlap, but they can be very different. A kinship family that doesn't qualify for foster care then doesn't get foster care support. So they're kind of on the outskirts of that. So there are a lot of, I think, misconceptions when it comes to um, some, like lawmaking or funding, because there's not the realization of like how much it really does cost to surprise, I'm raising an extra child. But I don't know if that answers your question. Those are kind of like different kinds of misconceptions, but
It does. Thank you.
yeah, for sure.
So that just made me think of another question too
Yeah.
around the myth, but also is there certain areas within the state of Utah that have more kinship care that you're aware of? And what are some of those risk factors that may contribute to?
Right, right. I mean, I don't have like the statistics memorized, but I do know,
Seriously, you don't? Come on.
yeah, I
I'm
know.
just
Sorry,
kidding.
guys. Sorry, guys. But I will say from I've worked in several different offices throughout the state, and I will say Salt Lake and Weber County, I think see at least we see the most. There may be that like Box Elder County, maybe it's just that people don't know about our services, right? And it's a self-reported thing, so statistically we only know what people tell us. But Salt Lake and Weber counties are our busiest offices by far, and we have just constant flow of new intakes and people needing those services. And I think there's a lot of contributing factors. Um, I think when there's a lot of high stress in a community, whether it's due to financial stress or whatever, there's just not a lot of financial opportunity or whatever it is that does create stressors on the family, which then can increase likelihood of using substances and child abuse and things like that. And so, um, obviously, we see substance use and child abuse in families that have a lot of money too, right? But I think there's an increased likelihood when there's not a lot of other resources, um, and maybe it's a generational trauma, those kinds of things that play into it too. So yeah, I think the great thing though about Salt Lake and Weber counties is they have a ton of free resources. They're probably the most resourceful counties, which is great in helping to combat some of these challenges. So
Great, thank you.
yeah, sure.
We'll give it just another minute. If anybody else has a question that's popped up or generated conversation around this.
I don't have a question, Chelsea. I just want to tell you thank you again. I know you've presented before, and this is one of my favorite presentations. Such an important work because having done early intervention for almost 30 years, I've seen so many grandparents literally save the lives of these kids that are in such bad situations. And not that foster families aren't great, but when you can go to that grandparent it just makes such a big difference. And so many times I'll go in and they are tired and it's hard. And so bringing the awareness to the fact that, yeah, it costs a lot of money, not just financially, but a lot of time. Maybe they can't work full time anymore. They've got to work part time so they can shift off with the kid. It's just such an important service. And I love how you present and you do such a great work. So I just want to say thank you. And thank you for all those kids who are now 25 years old that, 25 years ago when I saw them, were benefiting from their grandparents helping with the upbringing and caregiving for them. And this is just such a great program. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Kurt. I really appreciate that. And like you're saying, I think there's a huge benefit in children staying with family, or at least people that they know, and it does provide that extra level of safety and care. And thank you for the work that you do for families as well. It sounds like you've been pretty involved with them. And so it takes a village, it takes all of us to help out.
It does. Brings us back to that whole thing that social connectiveness is
Mhm.
really a part of public health, right? And we should start
Yes.
thinking about it in terms of that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to have Leo can come up and he is going to share the case that we will all be discussing today.
I'm gonna I'm gonna
I'll stop
share.
sharing here.
No, you're good. You're good. Let me see. Okay. Um, I have presented a few cases before for this network, so hopefully you guys know who I am. But if you don't, I'm Leo. I'm the project assistant for Project Echo here up at the IDRPP. And I just have a case for you guys. I hope it's sharing. Is it sharing, Janelle?
Yep, it is. You're good.
Okay. So just some background on this case. It's the family is set in rural Utah and they're a kinship household and it's a grandmother actually caring for two young siblings. She does have the support of the grandfather, but he usually does work a pretty heavy schedule sometimes just outside. So it's not really possible for him to give her that much support, but he still does support her. The children, there's two. So there's an infant who's about 4 months old and there's a toddler who is 2.5 years old. And just some of these key background pieces. So the children were actually placed with their grandma after their mother may have resumed the use of illicit substances and just experienced general trauma throughout some of her life circumstances. And the infant was also born substance exposed, which we do know, and they are showing mild withdrawal symptoms, but do seem to be medically stable now. The grandma does still tell me there's a bit of difficulty getting him to sleep at night, not just a bit, but kind of a lot. So it's been really tough on her. And the toddler also does show some delays in speech and emotional regulation. And me and the grandma, the grandma and I have noticed, but uh, we don't necessarily know if the mother has noticed. And some of those family dynamics, which I think are really important to understand, is that the grandma is really loving and attentive, but she's pretty exhausted by just the demands of caring for those two young children. And communication from mom has been a little bit unpredictable, sorry. So, um, I mean, I mainly speak with the grandma, and I've just noticed that mom does become a bit upset when grandma tries to set some of those boundaries around the children or around that caregiving aspect. And this is just from the very few times I've spoken to mom and just seen both of them interact with each other. And I'm also told that the toddler, the 2.5-year-old, also becomes dysregulated for hours after mom visits, which definitely does affect the infant, as I've seen before. So, just the primary area of concern, both of these children actually show significant dysregulation following mom's unpredictable visits. Toddler displays intense behavioral outbursts and regression, and the infant has disrupted feeding and sleep patterns and increased irritability. The toddler, just to give more context, even the toddler has prolonged meltdowns, hitting, screaming, and does become clingy to grandma for hours afterward, especially if the mom does do a really unexpected visit. These behaviors are high end, and he does become clingy for most of the day. The infant also becomes difficult to soothe, and he has disrupted sleep, as I stated before, and also just shows increased startle responses. And grandma is tired She feels that she cannot meet both of these children's needs when they're really dysregulated at the same time, and she just feels as if they're she wants more support. So some of the goals for this family is just to reduce dysregulation in both children after contact with the mother. Another goal is to create just those predictable and developmentally appropriate routines around that parental contact. And another goal is just to support grandma's confidence and reduce her burnout and to stabilize the infant's feeding and sleep patterns. And some of the barriers is that grandma doesn't have legal custody currently over the two children. So grandma can't necessarily control when mom comes and visits. Grandma does fear guardianship will actually damage the relationship that she has with her daughter, and there is limited access to, those early childhood mental health services in the rural area. I know early intervention services have been mentioned, but I do not know if those have been accessed yet by the grandma or by the mother. And there isn't any additional information that I did want to share, but the community discussion questions, I just have three for us to speak about today. So the first would be, how can we support the grandmother in setting safe, predictable boundaries around the mother's visits without having that formal custody? And the second question would be, what infant and toddler regulation strategies can help stabilize both children after dysregulated parental contact? And the third would be, how can we help caregivers navigate guilt and loyalty conflicts when their family may be misusing substances? So, yeah, that's the case I have for today.
Great. Kurt, do you have a question?
I've got a couple of questions. One, it sounds like mom doesn't live in the home, but lives nearby enough to just drop in. And you said something about that grandma can't really control when she drops in. So daughter can just drop in anytime and see the kids or mom, I guess not daughter, mom can just drop in. Is that kind of the situation?
Yeah, essentially. She doesn't live too far off from the grandma. I think that's why it's also unpredictable. I think it's like a 15-minute drive,
Okay.
perhaps, but it's unpredictable. But yeah, the mom does live close enough to have those opportunities to just kind of have those really unexpected and surprise visits with grandma.
Okay. And then the other question I had with the guardianship. Talk to me about what guardianship, I mean, do you know what guardianship means? Because I'm not sure, and maybe Chelsea or someone else can help as well. Because there's foster care, and I know when kids are in foster care, they like, you can't tell bio mom or bio dad where we live, who we are, what our phone numbers are because it's foster. Well, I mean, obviously with grandma, the mom probably has some contact. Are there different rules around guardianship than there is around foster care or that sort of thing? Or because it sounds like you said grandma's worried about losing guardianship, and that made me think, okay, what is the guardianship? Is it just kind of an informal, hey, take care of the kid while mom gets her feet on the ground, or that? So I don't know if anybody could answer that question for me. I've always wondered about that, never had an answer. So
I think with the grandma, she actually doesn't have guardianship over the two children. I'm trying to think of like the differences between guardianship and foster care. Oh,
Looks
I,
like
I'm happy to
Kelsey.
I
help out
think
if you'd like.
Okay,
Yep.
I just think from my understanding, foster care is more state controlled. I don't necessarily know about guardianship if it's as state controlled as foster care, but I know for a fact that with foster care systems, it's basically really heavily just relies on the state and like on the state giving them legal custody. And I think that's why there are places such as foster homes because the state can have foster homes. But I think under guardianship, yeah. That's the only difference. I'm sorry, Kurt. I don't know if Chelsea has more to speak on it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a it can be really tricky with situations like this where they need guardianship but are worried about getting it. But I would say that the main difference is with foster care, usually that's been court ordered or DCFS has been involved. And with the cases we often see, DCFS can't open a case for everything. And sometimes there's cases that because the children are already safe and stable with the parent or with the grandparent, they determine, hey, we don't need to open a case. But then it leaves the grandparent with no custody and no rights. And unless there has been a DCFS case open, there's a short window where a caregiver can apply for that foster care license. And most of the time they don't meet that requirement because the window's so short and by the time they find out it's gone. And with guardianship, that one is through district courts, which basically just means anybody can go on and fill out the papers without having a DCFS case. But it does make it tricky when a judge, for example, we've had situations where a client has gone to court for guardianship. DCFS is not able to open a case, but the judge says, well, you need to go to juvenile court or through foster care route, whatever. They can't because DCFS won't open a case. So I think like when it comes to guardianship, a lot of caregivers are in that situation where they're concerned about if they get guardianship, it will upset the parent. The parent can object to it and then take the kids. And so anyways, that's like a wordy answer for you. I know I gave a lot of information, but hopefully that kind of clarifies it a little bit more.
Okay, so we are going to go into the breakout groups. Tori, if you want to go ahead and open those breakout groups, we'll come back at about 1:15 and remind us that next month, July 8th, we will be hearing from Trisha Reynolds on incarcerated mothers. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next month.